Hello everyone and welcome to the next episode of Art Side of Life, where I chat with inspiring artists and create various art-related videos. My name is Eva and my guest today is Jessica Fong, the co-founder of an indie game studio. And in this episode you will learn about how they are creating games in their studio and why it's important to keep good relations with people you meet at conventions.
Most of the people we knew through my time having done conventions and connections I made through GDC. And you don't even think about it because when you make connections or make friends at different events, you just never know the connections in your past are going to come back and help you.
Jessica is a freelance illustrator with traditional arts background and the co-founder of a previously mentioned indie game studio called Lonely Egg.The. The studio develops highly artistic and deeply personal games, and their first game is called In the Keeper's Shadow, a fantastical retelling of her visionary world and portfolio of over 10 years of work. So please welcome Jessica and let's get to the interview. Welcome everyone to the next episode of Art Side of Life, and I'm super happy to have Jessica here. Hi!
Hi!
So please welcome, and let's just start with your background right away, and maybe you can mention some of your biggest decisions which you had to do in order to get where you're now.
So my background is actually in fine art. When I went to college, I studied studio art at Cal Poly, and then when I exited out and graduated, I went into illustration and concept art. So that's a little bit of my background. So I come from the traditional and the digital background.
And what kind of influenced you when you were young, when you had to decide okay, what I'm going to do, and choosing the art career? How was that for you?
It felt very natural because the things that I was going through when I was younger, they kind of manifested in a visual way. So I wasn't great at writing or, portraying what I was feeling through words, and visuals just felt like just natural, like it was something I was kind of meant to do. Yeah.
Did you have some favorite art books or TV series which influenced you in your art decision making?
When I was young, yes. So probably the first cartoons I saw were Pokemon, Sailor Moon, and all those beginning animation shows that you'd watch at Saturday morning, and those kind of brought me into a world that I didn't have. So those inspired that spark, that imagination spark.
And how did you choose your school or where to study? Because when we have so many different friends, right, when we are young, it's okay, maybe you can go study here, or some people don't understand which school in your close circle. Or did you have artistic environment around you?
So the field that I wanted to go into, I hadn't actually shaped it yet. I didn't understand what the field was quite yet. So when I went to look for a college, my big factor was I need to leave home. So I actually wasn't too picky, and I knew that I wanted to do art. Mm-hmm. So the one that made sense for me was Cal Poly, because we had students graduate from my high school to go to Cal Poly to study art. So we already had this pathway to going to that school. And it was highly recommended, and it does have a good graphics design program. Mm-hmm. But the most important thing to me was I needed to get out, and it's affordable, and I could pursue what I wanted.
So what was the thing what you learned first, in the school? Was it structured that you started with some materials, or did you go directly fundamentals, composition, or everything was kind of at the same time?
So Cal Poly is a very traditional school. They focus a lot on art theory, art history, mm-hmm. and the fine arts. So it was pretty structured. You learn all the basics and the theories. And I realized, I think halfway through my time there, that all that I was learning was great. I loved that stuff. But now I needed to shape it into something that made sense for my type of artwork, mm-hmm. and what I wanted to do. So I actually kind of started a club there for concept artists and illustrators. And then I also asked all of my professors if I could tailor my projects to be more like visual design for a movie or a game or a book. Yeah.
Oh, cool, cool. And so how was the club when you started? Like how many people were in there, or did you give yourselves like assignments as well?
We did assignments with each other. We did like daily sketches, and we would have people do stand-ups and do like presentations about different aspects of concept art or something. And there were not that many in the beginning. It was actually really hard because nobody knew what concept art really was. So we had people in there who were like me, who were like, this is something that I definitely want to do, and I kind of know about it. And then we had people in there who had no idea what it was. And they just knew that they liked movies and games and how they looked. So they came in, not expecting or knowing where to start or how to do any of that.
Yeah. And so you presented as a concept art, or as a like let's do something for movies, or like when the people didn't know like what is concept art, you like saw it in a magazine, or someone else told you that like in the movie industry it's called concept art.
Yeah, actually, yes, we kind of had this idea of what concept art was. And it was a very narrow view. We brought in some concept artists actually that lived in the area who had been doing it professionally. And then we realized that we had been limiting ourselves with the concept art because really it's like visual design for any type of project. So yeah, our view of concept art changed.
And did you do
For
like a competition as well, like among each other? Like, okay, let's have a one team, and then one person will have like, okay, you have a prize.
I don't know if we did competitions like that, but I know that we did challenges and we did often look for stuff online, to see if, people could put in entries and apply for things, outside of our school. So,
And
yeah.
how was your transition, from school and then the first job, like artistic inquiry, like, okay, first paid artistic job?
Oh boy. Okay, so when I got out of school, I had talked to a lot of artists who had worked for like AAA studios and had worked in offices, and that did not appeal to me. And also the type of artwork that I was doing, even though I could do artwork for clients, most of my artwork came from a inner perspective, so my own personal brand. And it just kind of made sense that I wanted to try freelancing and then entrepreneurship first, since I was young. And, there's not too much of like a financial burden if it fails. So that was actually my first gig out, was I did the freelancing and I did conventions and just sold my own branding and artwork. And I did freelance stuff on the side too. But yeah, most of my funding and life expenses came from the former.
And how was like, if you can take us to the story, like actual first job, or how did you find it? Was it like a commission of someone, or like what was it?
Yeah, the first stuff I did was at a local convention to me, was at Fanime. And Fanime, you get an artist alley table and you can sell your artwork and exhibit. And the first commissions I got were just private commissions, which actually was good for me because it was somewhat low risk, and a little bit more laid back, so it wasn't so intense. And it was very rewarding to like draw somebody else's character that they really loved, right? So then, you give it to them and it's like pure satisfaction the instant you give it to them. So that was my first commission, was drawing somebody else's original character.
Oh, nice. And so from that, how did you transition to different projects? And maybe you can mention like other stuff you worked on.
So it started out with just the private commissions, where it was just like people's characters and their personal art, like they wanted to gift somebody an artwork. And then from there, I dabbled a little bit in a graphic novel, for somebody's orchestra play. They wanted to try and turn it into a graphic novel. And after that, I did a couple stuff for board games, different indie board games. And then after that, I moved into games, because my boyfriend, he ended up going to UC Santa Cruz, which has a great game design program. And all of the students there, they team off and do different projects. And they desperately always need artists. So I kind of like, volunteered my services to do that, to just provide artwork for them. And I really liked that. most out of all the other types of artworks that I could have done. I liked game art the most.
Oh, nice. So what did you like the most about it? Was it the storytelling or something else?
It it was the storytelling and how everything kind of fit together and that you needed to be a part of all the other departments.
Mm-hmm.
It was just so interesting how intricate the collaborations were because, the writers have to talk to the designers, who have to talk to the composers, who have to, and it's just so interlinked. I actually felt like I was more part of the creative process. So.
Oh, cool. And so how does your normal day look like now? Like how many hours a day do you draw or?
Oh God, it is it is pretty intense because right now my partner and I were co-founders in our studio, so a lot of our day is just managing the day-to-day for the studio, and then doing the work with the team members for the different tasks,
Mm-hmm.
and then on the side I still do my personal artwork. So half my day is dealing with the studio and making our project with that.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other half is still like pursuing my personal brand and making sure my art skills don't go to waste and, to stretch them and work them. So that's kind of how my days are split right now.
Yeah, so you do always plan like project management and these kind of things at the first half of the day, and the second half of the day it's art creation. And do you also take like weekends like off, or do you work all the time?
For the most part, I work all the time. I don't have a designated day where I just like take time off. It's kind of like a week to week kind of thing. So if my family or my partner wants to go somewhere, then I'll like specifically mark off that day that, okay, no work. Yeah.
And do you have like a planner, which is like a physical planner, or do you have some cool tips for how to organize your time?
For organizing time, it's just being on top of it when things happen and being adaptive. So right now we're using Google Calendars, and I have lists next to me. I also have a whiteboard behind this computer that I take notes and everything on. But basically, the instant something is going to happen or that you need to get something done, write it down and put it into the calendar like ASAP. Because I just, I do it, I still mess up sometimes, and I'm like, oh my God, I totally forgot and didn't write it down. And yeah.
So do you like to work on more projects at the same time, or do you like to have like one and finish it and then move on to next one?
Right now, I guess it's kind of dual projects going on, and I do like it, having the studio and the games, and then my personal branding and the freelance. Mm-hmm. It just feels like I'm constantly working and doing something, like moving towards something. So I do like working on multiple projects.
Oh, perfect. So with how many people do you work now, or do you have everyone locally, or it's for someone who don't know, if you can describe the dynamics of your studio?
Yeah, so the studio, the only two people that are actually part of the studio and who are, I guess, employees are my partner and I, because we're both co-founders. Everybody else are collaborators and contractors. Mm-hmm. Most of them are local to us, as in like they're in the same state as us. not like in the same city. So no time difference. Yeah. So that was something that we wanted to keep. We had problems before with time management when people are like 8 hours or 10 hours apart. Mm-hmm. So we made it a factor this time to have everybody in the same time zone.
And how do you find people to work with? Is it through like ArtStation or like somewhere else?
It's actually, so for the team, it was interesting because our team is mostly made up of everybody that we knew or had connections through. So we didn't actually post job applications online and found a lot of people through that. The people that joined the team, they really wanted to join the team because they know us, or they're really connected to the story and the message, or this is right up their alley for the type of like social advocacy games they like to do anyways. And most of the people we knew through my time having done conventions and connections I made through GDC. Yeah, it was very interesting because when we did the call for help, um, it was really nice to have the people kind of the closest to us offer their services first.
Ah, nice, nice. Yeah, because then you know also how people work and
Mhm.
what are the dynamics, right? Like within the team, as you mentioned, like you know them already.
Yeah, yeah. And you don't even think about it because when you make connections or make friends at different events in your life,
Hmm.
one of the I think you interviewed him actually, Dan Howard.
Yeah.
So he's one of the artists on our team, and he and I go way back to convention days. And he volunteered to be on the team, and I would never have thought of it. Like we had just been friends for a long time, and you just never know the connections in your past are going to come back and help you.
Yeah, and so how do you do the networking? As you mentioned, you go to different conventions. Do you also go to like different sketch clubs, or maybe you did in the past?
Yeah, so on top of conventions, I do like to go to meetups and spend time with the people and the connections that I've made and also their groups of people. So it's a lot of meeting and getting to listen to other people's stories and the projects that they're working on. So
Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
And can you maybe recommend some cool meetups or nice conventions?
Well, the biggest one that I can think of right now is the one that's coming up, so GDC.
Hmm.
GDC is where we met a good number of the people that are on our team now. Um, I don't know. I can't recommend that one enough. Like it is like the best one that I've been to in a long time. The other ones that I've been to, they're great for selling your artwork and exhibiting and getting to know one-on-one your audience and the attendees that come by your booth. But it's probably not the best place if you want to meet fellow artists or
Hmm.
developers.
Hmm.
Um, yeah,
So if
which is what GDC is, Game Developers Conference. It's just purely like it's for the developers, for the
mhm.
people creating. Yeah.
Yeah, so then you can meet like also potential clients and
Hmm.
different people, right? So you can sell also
Yeah.
your products.
Yeah. Yeah.
So what do you usually bring for your convention?
Uh, so this was actually interesting. So I come from more of an anime convention background,
Hmm.
which has a different tone than like a an expo. So for anime conventions, when you buy the booth, you want to take advantage of as much of the space as you can. Which is why when you look at pictures of anime conventions, you'll see like everybody's displays are just covered with prints and merchandise. It may not be the best way to showcase your artwork, but it is the best way to sell it. Uh, and that's kind of what mine looks like at anime conventions. It's just you put up your best work and you have like a little tiny window so that people can still talk and see you. Um,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
Definitely. When you're
so
there, it's like, what?
so when I went to CTNX, the animation expo, and I exhibited there, it was much different. My display looked a lot different than the people around me who had maybe, four or five pieces up that are nicely like hanging and framed. And then mine that just like, comes from a anime convention. So
Okay, so when you're on the gaming convention, then it's like you display like less artwork, so they are like nicely visible. That's the main difference.
yeah, for gaming conventions, it's a lot different because you want your art there, but you also want your game must be there
Hmm.
too. If you want to have a good impact, you want your game to be there to be playable. So actually,
Hmm.
a big portion of your booth is having screens set up and player seating.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, you devote a lot of your space to that. So you don't actually have a ton of space to sell because you want people to also be interested in your game.
Hmm.
Uh, yeah.
And so, how did you develop your skills from, also like doing fine art and then moving into the entrepreneurship?
Um, I I think I touched on it a little bit in that when I went through school,
Hmm.
I did not know what I wanted to do with my artwork. I knew that I wanted to go into visual design, but did that mean doing it for other people or for myself? I just didn't know. And it was interesting to come from a studio art background because there they make you focus a lot on exploring your own artistic vision. Um, and that really clicked with me. And then it just kind of made sense after college that I would want to, pursue
Yeah.
the entrepreneurial stuff.
Yeah. But what I mean is as well, like how someone maybe helped you to kind of explore, like, okay, how do you do finances, or how do you actually set up company, or like how to take care of the revenue and these kind of things. Because like when we just start, then it's a bit tricky. And or did you listen to podcasts and books, or how did you develop the skills?
Yeah, so this is actually interesting because I think I don't know if it was just the time that I entered in at, or if this is a standard. I don't know. But when I left college, I did not know much about business and I did not know much about finances. I was kind of like a starry-eyed graduate. I was like, I'm really passionate about this. I just want to start a project. And I jumped the gun way too fast. So for me, I made a lot of mistakes in the 2 years that followed my graduation. And through those mistakes, that's when my partner and I started to research a ton about business and financing.
And can you recommend maybe some resources, or something you found really helpful?
Yeah, our first great resource was our fellow peers. When we started to open up about the issues we were having and about the problems we had, they were the first ones to tell us, because they're a second pair of eyes looking in, and they could tell us, wow, this is not going to work, or this is awful, and then they would go into why, because they have more experience than us. And then after that, we just searched online for every tutorial, video. There's a ton of great resources for, if you just look up what are the rules about copyright and how do you balance the books. There's a lot of great stuff about that. And if you have the money and the ability to, definitely look into a personal accountant and a lawyer, because those were two things that we did not do in the beginning, and it really kicked us in the butt later. So
yeah, because then it's also good to research what you would need later and how to put the contracts together and all of that, right? Before we continue, let's take a little break, because many of you have been asking me about recommendations for different tools and resources to help you out with many different things, like studying, finding inspiration, overcoming artistic block, managing your time, and freelance. So I decided from now on, in the episodes, I will share with you some of my favorite things which help me a lot, and I'm sure they can help you out too. So let's go take a look. So the first one is Audible, which is the largest audiobook store out there with more than 100,000 audiobooks. And I love listening to stories and learning from books, and even if you are not a book reader, this is a great way to get the knowledge and advice from books just by listening. It would be a shame to miss out on all the great tips if you just don't like to read. I usually listen to audiobooks while I'm traveling, doing housework, or painting. It's very relaxing and I learn a lot. What is awesome, you can get free 30 days trial, which is like getting free books. So try it out for yourself and go to artsideoflife.com/audible. The next one is for all the freelancers and studio owners out there. It's called FreshBooks, and it's an invoice and accounting software that is super easy to use and significantly cuts your time needed for invoicing, getting paid, tracking expense, time tracking, and making proposals. Great part about this is that with few clicks you can export all important data for your tax declaration too. And you can get a free trial 30 days to test it out for yourself too. So go to artsideoflife.com/freshbooks. The last one is trusted house sitters, and as you maybe already know, I love traveling to refresh my inspiration and avoid art blocks, but my budget doesn't allow it so often. Fortunately, I discovered Trusted House Sitters website, where you can do the pet sitting and live for free like a local. I love dogs and cats and all kinds of animals, so it's great win-win. In this way, it's only about buying a flight ticket or travel there by car. Accommodation is for free and you can have great fun with animals, and you can also draw them and practice your animal anatomy skills. It also works for those of you who have pets and are looking for pet sitters to be able to travel. So check it out at artsideoflife.com/ths. You will find more artistic resources, tips, and tools used by me or mentioned in the interviews at artsideoflife.com/resources. So go check it out. And just to let you know, some of the links are affiliate links, which means I will get paid a small commission if you decide to purchase through them, but at absolutely no added cost to you. And in this way, you get a chance to support Artside of Life, which I really appreciate. And now, let's go back to the interview. And if you think about like the most difficult art career moment, if you can take us to that story and maybe what was the takeaway, because that's where, as you mentioned also previously, like that's where we learn the most. Like if you can give us like one example.
Yeah, the example I have, it is kind of the most recent thing that has happened to us too. It's a little bit of a story. I'm gonna try and compress it. So when I got out of college, again, I was starry-eyed, and I was just very hopeful and optimistic, and I just wanted to jump right in. So we actually found a studio that was across the states, a small little startup studio that offered their services, and they liked the artwork, and they wanted to team up with us. And when we teamed up, we just went straight into working. We didn't do contracts. We didn't talk about the IP. I mean, everything that you could have kind of done wrong, we did, which, you know, it didn't seem like a problem in the beginning because we were like, you know, we're all here. We know each other. We'll talk about it later when it makes sense. And, you know, fast forward 2 years, we realized that because we had not put in those foundations and the team was starting to get upset about, you know, what their responsibilities were, what they were going to be compensated for, what was their position on the team versus the studio. It got very hairy, and we had to separate from the other studio. And that was very hard because I don't think a lot of artists think about, if you're going to pursue your own personal brand and narrative and storytelling, a lot of these stories for us start when we're very young, and you grow up with these characters and these artworks and these stories, and it just doesn't even occur to you that those things that you've grown up with can be put in jeopardy or in danger later on, especially when you want to turn it into a business. And that's what we were facing, which is, you know, like the characters that we had there and the artworks, they're very close to us. And the big thing that I think caused the separation was because we had not talked about it, and I just kind of trusted and had faith that everybody knew the history of the project. We got into some serious issues with the IP, because then it was the other studio thought that a lot of the characters and the story and everything was made by them, or owned by them. And it just wasn't the case. The team, because they'd been so close to the project, they understood where all the characters and stories came from. So there was a huge divide. And it was very scary as an artist when these characters are so close to your heart and you've grown up with them, to have the potential that they could be taken away through a process that you don't understand, like copyright, trademarking. It can be very harrowing for an artist. And that is why whenever I talk to somebody who's trying to pursue their own narrative and adventure, you know, I'm just like, talk to your team, figure out the paperwork, and make sure that every single person on the team knows what the project is about and where it comes from. Because if you don't have that, you know, it just causes misunderstanding, and people have different ideas of what creative control is, and who is making what. So
Oh,
yeah.
perfect. So then, when you when you are starting your IP, then as you mentioned, you will like research a copyright and different things like how to apply it to your ideas, even though when you are just starting out. Because then,
Mhm.
or what are the steps you would do as a like to tick
If I were to
off?
redo it,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
If I were to redo it, actually, the first thing I would do is compile everything you have about your IP. Uh, this was easier for me because the type of artist that I am, I tend to write a lot of stuff down and I keep a lot of my old sketches. So I had a lot of artwork from my childhood and all the written stuff that I had done before. You want that. In case anybody puts into question where these things came from, you have the originals. Um, and make sure you compile that for everybody to kind of look at for the project. You don't want any questions about like where anything came from. And then look into copyright and trademarking because trademarking is important, especially for the title of things, and the type of project you're doing. So for our game, when we announced the separation, the other studio had immediately filed the trademark a day later. So, the name of the game in relation to the game format, uh, they bought that right. So now they can make a game with that title. Uh, and that immediately like restricts you from making a game under that title. So you want to be careful, like if you have characters and stuff that you have lived with for a long time and you just are like, oh, well, this is a cool name. And, it doesn't really occur to you to look up whether or not something like that already exists. I know that there are a couple of games that did that, where they worked under a working title, and then when it came to release, they find out that
This
somebody's already
exists.
had a very similar title. Yeah. And then they would have to change their entire, um, so trademarking is important. And then copyright. If you have the originals and you can tell that the things in your game are derivative of the originals, you know, that's perfectly fine.
Yeah.
That's how ours worked. So like I had all the material from my childhood, um, up until college that I brought into the project. So anything made during the project is derivative of that stuff,
Yeah.
which, you want to be able to explain your project like that. Um, yeah.
Definitely. Yeah. And also, as you mentioned, the contracts, that's another thing, even though when you want to start just working with a friend, or there are
Mhm.
like templates for, like, okay, like, how do you call it? Like pre-contract agreements. So you can
Mhm.
like refill like some simple things. So even though for someone who is just starting out, it can be really scary, like, okay, how do I do this? But there are also templates. Or did you at the time use some template, or afterwards you just found some counselor who helped you with the contract?
Yeah, so for the studio that's between our Lonely Egg studio, between my partner and I, we in the beginning we went to a lawyer, and he had been the same lawyer that was dealing with our dispute before. He was a copyright lawyer, and then he also deals with small businesses. So we asked him, do you have templates for independent contractors, work for hires, and all of that stuff? And those are just templates. So we voiced to him what we wanted because we
Yeah.
had a very particular way that we wanted people to be paid and how their time is recorded. Um, and it was very easy. We just basically, spat out everything we wanted. And because, he's a very seasoned lawyer, he can take all of that word garbage and put it into the contracts easily. So that was very helpful. A lot of people I know try to write their own contracts, which is, commemorable, but it's not. If you don't come from a legal background, you could be putting yourself at risk if you don't put it in right. Uh, yeah.
The
So
special wordings and everything, right?
yeah, yeah. Having a lawyer who already had templates ready and who knew how to, because the lawyers, like when you go to a lawyer, you have to understand, like you're looking at a person who's dealt with probably thousands of these applications. So they know. Yeah.
And how do you start now a new project when you like are just thinking about something? And do you guys do like mood boards or research? And do you sketch like thumbnails, or what are kind of your bullet points of starting new maybe artwork?
Yeah, so ours is a little interesting. It follows a format of, there are other games out there that do this too that are really narrative and art focused. Um, it's a unique process because all of the departments have to be very, very close knit with one another. So if the writers write out a scene, that scene and their writing has to mesh with the canon of the world that already exists, and it has to mesh with the vision that like the project lead has and everything. And then, once that's done, the artists come in and storyboard, do the color moods, and they're just basic, very simple sketches. I mean, storyboard, like animation kind of sketches.
Yeah.
And then the level designers come in and they mark it up with, like all the gameplay mechanics and the things that need to happen. And then the artists come back and they have to make more fleshed out, polished assets that can go into the game. So, and then even between like all of those different processes, we have to talk constantly and do that back and forth. There isn't any one department that gets to function alone. It's an interesting process. So for anybody who's going to do like an art and narrative focused game, to be wary of that. Because if you're not used to doing that much collaboration or talking to a team in that regard, you have to rethink it.
Yeah. And do you do something daily which contributes to your success? Like meditation or walks outside or something?
Yeah, it actually really helps to have a pet. Because, you have somebody in the house. I mean, my partner, he relies on me too, but a pet, like their entire world revolves around you. So, they need to be fed. They have a routine. If they want to go out walking, well, you're going to have to go out and walk the dog. So having other responsibilities like my pet kind of grounds me outside of my projects.
Yeah. And do you have an office at home, or do you have to travel somewhere?
We do. We're actually living with my father for a couple of reasons. One, pricing. It's so much more to have both of my partner and I being able to live in the same space and have two separate offices in the same place. And third, my father is a huge part of the game that we're actually making because it's so close to our personal history. We want him to be close by and have a close eye on the game as we make it. Yeah, so we're living here. We have two separate rooms, so he gets his own office and we get our own. That was something we realized early on too, was like we cannot work together in the same room. Like I'm trying to be in a meeting and he's in the middle of gaming, or he's in the meeting. It doesn't work.
Yeah, because you need to have your own space to create or to organize and everything. Yeah. That's totally true. We have to have that as well. It's like we have to have a separate rooms, otherwise it doesn't work. But yeah.
And I think art is unique in that sense too. Like with digital art, when you're an artist and you sit down, you're not doing paperwork or you're not doing computer work where you can kind of take breaks and your attention can be split. When you're doing artwork, I think a lot of people can connect on this. But when you sit down and you're ready, you've got your water, you've got everything set up. Once you're ready, once you sit down, you're there for like the next 2-3 hours, completely focused and doing the same task continuously for that time. So you really need like the space where you can focus.
Yeah. And then do you take breaks like every, I don't know, 2 hours or, like just so you have some movement?
Yeah. That's where the routines come in handy. On a more daily basis, having to get up to like feed the dog or do chores, and then having time for like yourself, that that happens every 2.5-3 hours.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And now with the whole business, how do you combine your income streams? Is it mainly from like selling the art prints or the game, or what are your different income streams?
So the income streams we have now, because I'm with my partner, it
Mm-hmm.
becomes a different problem. Because now we both need to be together on the income stream part. Just for like living expenses and rent on top of the expenses for the game and whatever. Um, so our different income streams are my freelancing, um, and for him, it's his day job. So he has a day job at a startup. And we started now mostly because for the last, I want to say like last 9 to 10 years, I've just been saving. So I actually have a good buffer saved up, which is why it was a decent time to start now. Um, so that income stream came from conventions and when freelancing was more my full time. And I know a lot of other artists do this too. I have another friend, Viv. She's working on her own animation, and she's great. She's trying to show her animation and pitch it to animation companies and everything. But before she even started her project, she spent a long time having a good chunk of savings as a buffer, you know, if she needs to hire people, if she needs to buy new software, or if rent becomes an issue. Um, yeah.
Yeah, definitely, because that's important to plan ahead. Like if you want to make this kind of leap or big decision, that you kind of have this buffer, as you mentioned, so you don't have to spend time like trading. You work for like time, money wise, and yeah, so you can create your own project.
Yeah, and I think your team members will know too. You know, projects, if you can think of something going wrong, just act like, yeah, that thing is gonna happen. That one thing is gonna go wrong. So you want to like prepare for that scenario.
Yeah, because you will always have like ups and downs, and you just have to keep going.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah. Being
And
too optimistic can kind of blind you to those things.
so, but now you know how to be prepared and how to do it in the future. And so, what are your maybe like dream scenarios, like 5 to 10 years? Like, what would you maybe like to have on the market? Like, is it yeah, some like more games or books or something you can share with us, which is not confidential?
I I would like to pursue games still, but I think on a bigger picture, we have two big goals. One is we want to be able to create franchises that we can make multiple mediums from. So the game that we have now, for example, In the Keeper's Shadow, if that became its own thing, you know, we could make web comics, illustrated children's books from the world, you know, and have physical merchandise too. So it's something that could last a long time. So we would like to create more of that. And then on top of that, a bigger ultimate goal, I guess, is we want to hit a point with the studio where we have enough games to inspire and also fund the studio so that we can basically act as publishers for somebody else. Because we really connect with studios that have gotten to a point of success where they can now allocate funding and resources to helping creators and developers who wouldn't, you know, have had those opportunities or those resources. So that's ultimately where we want to be, is where we want to get to a place where we're financially stable and able to help others. So yeah.
Ah, cool. Yeah, and if, as you mentioned, like in a far future, right, the 100 years, this would be like the ultimate goal, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, you know, you want to get to that point where, I mean, at least for us, we want to get to a point where like we can see the fruits of our labor in other people's lives, not just our own, and being able to give resources or feedback or mentorship to somebody else, you know, that is something that you'll see the fruits of for a long time to come. So, yeah.
Definitely, yeah, perfect. Then before we finish and say goodbye, maybe you can share last piece of advice or key takeaway on your from your artistic journey, and then we'll slowly finish.
Yeah, I think there are a couple of things that are interesting. I think that I think people might want to think about. Uh, I know when I get down or when I have art blocks or, for mental health, if things just look bleak or bad, um, I know a lot of artists can get into this state where they just want to like quit art or, it gets hard as you start to question if this is really the thing that you need to be doing or if you have the talents to do so. And the thing that really helped us is when you're in those kind of moments to like take a step back and realize that if you're in a creative block or if you're not doing well, it's not because you lack the creative, the creative drive or the passion. That will stay with you forever. So basically, if you're feeling sick or you're feeling bad, like take a break, walk away, because when you come back, your creativity will still be there. It's not something that's just gonna, disappear. which is
It's just inside.
Yeah. So I think like, it's not something that we should try to, stress about or worry that, you're for some reason or another, you're like just not creative inside or you're losing your creative edge. That's not, that's probably a sign that I just need to take a break.
So what do you do for recharge?
I step away and I try to not think about the project and just live life because I find, like my artwork, since it's my personal branding and it comes from a place of, my experiences and my vision, those things couldn't have happened unless I lived life and had those experiences and vision. So it's like I got to take a step away and just kind of, live, like play with the dog, go out, see a movie with, the boyfriend or, call up an old friend that I haven't talked to in a long time. So,
Yeah, because when we are in that work spiral, right, sometimes we forget to call people and just do other stuff.
Yeah. You lose track, and it's I see a lot of artists that try to say, your work is your life, but that is not the case for me. I very much care about having those two be in balance with one another. Yeah, you can't like not live life and expect to have a lot of material to be influencing your artwork. If you haven't been to Italy or you haven't been to, Japan and you try to paint memories or scenes of that world, I mean, you need those experiences to make genuine stuff like that. So
yeah, or just like the smells, or you see how people walk around and these kind of things, right?
yeah, yep. And the second thing I guess would be, I recently heard a talk from a developer, Rami Ismail, and he talked about how all advice is bad. I got to explain that one a bit because
I heard that one as well. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think it's really important because it jives with what I believe is like, as an artist, you want to be living your own journey and your own experience. It's nice to hear from other artists and to understand how they got to where they are, but to know that you need to forge your own mistakes, your own kind of successes, and live the life that you want to live that doesn't match somebody else's. And the all advice is bad thing is, if you hear advice or you hear about other experiences, you have to like take it into context for your own life. Like I've seen people say like, you must go to art college or, you must whatever. And then that student hears that and they feel the pressure to go to art college. And if that student doesn't have the means to do so, and it would financially corrupt them, they'd be in debt forever. That's maybe not the best solution for that particular student. So that's something that I definitely take into consideration is like, I love hearing about other people's stories, looking at tutorials, looking at videos, but it's more experience, taking in experiences rather than, these are the things to do for success.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And everything has a plus and a minus. So yeah, everything advantages, disadvantages. So what is the best for yeah, basically your case, how you feel about it, or yeah, so
Mhm.
don't get pressured by the either the society or the close circle, and just yeah, what is good for you.
Yeah. Huh.
the,
I,
the,
I don't think artists take enough time to like really introspect
yeah,
themselves,
yeah.
especially concept art. Concept art is very, if you started out like we did and you think that concept art is a very like narrow field, um, you could narrow yourself in that like you think that this is the type of artwork you need to do to be successful. Because when we were starting out, all we saw were like artworks from Assassin's Creed and and like all these epic landscapes, and we were like, that's what we need to do, we're just going to focus on that. And then we realized like that's don't need to
Yeah, you
don't
don't
need to
have
box
to.
yourselves in like that. Yeah. Yeah.
Definitely, or create something on your own, and yeah, create a new field.
Yeah, exactly. So pursuing what you like is going to push the things that you like, and you'll see that it creates something much more unique for the talents that you can provide. Um,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, totally agree, and it was really nice way to also to, like finish the discussion. And thank you so much again for being here.
Yeah, yeah, no problem. I love this.
Perfect. So thanks again, and thanks everyone who joined today as well. And see you in the next episode. Hey guys, thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate you being here. And if you enjoyed this video, please subscribe because I post new videos every week. I would be also super happy if you let me know your thoughts in comments and give the video a thumbs up. You can find all the resources mentioned in this episode at artsideoflife.com. Just type a guest name in the search bar. There is also a couple of free artist resources ready for you. So if you want to listen to the interviews on the go too, make sure to check out the podcast at artsideoflife.com/podcast. Continue to inspire each other, and I will see you guys in the next episode. Bye!